Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Lees. Here are today's top stories. The Prime Minister says the HGV driver shortage is an international problem as the world emerges from the pandemic, but promises a better Christmas despite supply woes.
I'll make you a very confident prediction that this Christmas will be considerably better than last Christmas.
The traffic light system is scrapped as international travel rules are simplified for vaccinated UK residents. And many of the world's rich and powerful are denying wrongdoing after leaked files known as the Pandora Papers reveal purported secrets of hidden wealth. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said today he's predicting a much better Christmas than last year's, but supply chain problems could continue in the run-up to the festive holidays. NTD's Eddie Aiken has the story.
The Prime Minister said on Monday the lack of HGV drivers is an international problem as the world emerges from the pandemic.
When you talk about some of the supply chain issues, that's really a function of the world economy, particularly the UK economy, coming back to life after COVID, sucking in gas in particular.
Johnson's comments come as the country faces a fuel supply shortage. The PM says the UK aims to reach complete clean energy production by 2035. That means the nation won't be dependent on imported oil or natural gas. He makes the comment while visiting a Network Rail facility in Manchester, where the Conservative Party is holding its annual conference.
What we want to see is a high-wage, high-skill economy where we invest in people, invest in fantastic infrastructure like this behind me, and drive high productivity growth. That's the model we should be going for.
On Sunday, the Prime Minister promised a better Christmas this year, but didn't rule out further supply disruptions in the lead-up. He says the government will do everything it can to help.
On Christmas, let me tell you this, Beth, I'll make you a very confident prediction that this Christmas will be considerably better than last Christmas.
Speaking during a visit to a Manchester youth facility, the PM says the UK has robust supply chains and is a world leader in logistics. Opposition parties have urged Johnson to recall Parliament next week to address labour shortages and supply chain disruptions. Eddie Aiken, NTD News.
While the fuel crisis is said to be virtually at an end, north of the home counties, petrol stations in and around London are still short. The government is deploying the army to help deliver fuel. NTD's Malcolm Hudson has this report.
The Petrol Retailers Association says that about 22% of the petrol stations in London and the southeast of England are still without fuel. Executive Director Gordon Balmer says that this is due to the dense population and that it might take up to 10 days to get back up to normal. 200 military personnel will deliver fuel to tackle driver shortages from Monday. In Hemel Hempstead, soldiers fill up tankers ready to deliver. Whilst in London, there are still long queues at petrol stations.
That's my third petrol station which I'm trying. So it's just terrible. Nothing we can do about it. We just need to wait.
And we couldn't find any anywhere. I just driven actually from Sidcup and there was absolutely none at all. But I'm hoping to be able to top up at least half my tank now.
To be fair, I've only just pulled up, but I've passed 5 garages that are all closed, and it doesn't look like they've got any diesel, so I don't know. It's looking like the diesel pumps are closed, so I don't know what I'm going to do because I've got a load of deliveries to do and I've only got a little bit left, so.
The Petrol Retailers Association says that the crisis is virtually at an end in Scotland, northern and central England, with only 6% of forecourts still dry. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News.
Britain warned the European Union on Monday it would trigger safeguard measures in their divorce deal. That is if the bloc fails to agree to changes to smooth trade with Northern Ireland. NTD's Joy Duguid has more on this.
Britain's Brexit minister threatened on Monday to trigger a contentious break clause in the Brexit deal with the European Union. David Frost spoke at the Conservative Party conference in Manchester.
The arrangements have begun to come apart even more quickly than we feared. Thanks to the EU's heavy-handed actions, cross-community political support for the protocol has collapsed. The protocol itself is now undermining the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. Businesses, political parties, the institutions, and indeed all in Northern Ireland now face instability and disruption.
The protocol requires customs and border checks on some goods moving between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. It's intended to prevent goods from Britain entering the EU's single market while keeping an open border between Northern Ireland and Ireland.
So I urge the EU to be ambitious. It's no use tinkering around the edges. We need significant change.
He said without major changes, Britain will invoke Article 16. That provision lets either side suspend the agreement in exceptional circumstances. EU officials are likely to greet Frost's ultimatum with disdain. The bloc has repeatedly said it will not renegotiate a deal that was signed by both sides in good faith. Frost says intensive talks with Brussels need to start soon. Joy Duguid, NTD News.
Travel rules are simplified for most fully vaccinated travellers from today. They'll no longer need to do a pre-departure test and the traffic light system ends. NTD's Costa Jimenez has the details.
New international travel rules came into force on Monday. The traffic light system is scrapped, with locations now categorized as either on the red list or not. The rules are simplified and cheaper for fully vaccinated residents and unvaccinated under 18s from over 50 countries and territories. They don't need to take a pre-departure rapid test or an 8-day PCR test after arriving in the UK. They don't need to self-isolate at home or where they're staying either. All they need is a single PCR test on day 2 after arrival. Unvaccinated travellers from non-red list countries need to take a pre-departure test, day 2 and day 8 PCR tests, and self-isolate for 10 days. Travellers from a red list country are still required to spend 11 nights at a quarantine hotel. It comes amid reports the number of countries on the red list will be slashed from 54 to 9 later in the week. Brazil, Mexico and South Africa are expected to be removed from the red list. Fully vaccinated travellers to England will be able to use a cheaper lateral flow test for their day 2 post-arrival test soon. The government says it aims to have it in place by the October half-term week. Costa Jimenez, NTD News.
A massive leak of financial documents, known as the Pandora Papers, was published by several major news organizations on Sunday. It allegedly ties world leaders to secret stores of wealth. NTD's Eddie Aiken has the details.
A massive leak of financial documents published on Sunday allegedly ties world leaders to secret stores of wealth, from the King of Jordan to associates of Russian President Vladimir Putin. It is being called the Pandora Papers and was published by several major news organizations. The dump of almost 12 million records comes 5 years after the leak known as the Panama Papers, which exposed how money was hidden by the wealthy in ways undetectable by law enforcement agencies. The International Consortium of Investigative Journalists said the new trove of files were linked to dozens of current and former national leaders and amount to the biggest leak of offshore data in history. However, the group did not say how the files were obtained, and Reuters could not independently verify the allegations or documents. Among the claims are that Jordan's King Abdullah, a close ally of the United States, used offshore accounts to spend more than £70 million on luxury homes in the US and UK. Lawyers representing Abdullah told the consortium he had not made any use whatsoever of the proceeds of aid or assistance intended for public use. The Washington Post, which is part of the network, reported on the case of Svetlana Krivonogich, a Russian woman who the paper says was in a secret relationship with President Vladimir Putin. The Post says that just weeks after she gave birth to a baby girl in 2003, she became the owner of a Monaco apartment through an offshore company. The Kremlin did not respond to requests for comment. The documents also allege that the Czech Republic's Prime Minister, Andrej Babiš, owned an offshore estate worth £16 million on the French Riviera. The news comes just days before the country's parliamentary elections. Babiš on Sunday denied any wrongdoing while speaking during a television debate. Eddie Aiken, NTD News.
Further to this story, the Pandora Papers allege that prominent Conservative Party donor Mohammed Amassi purchased 2 UK properties using secretive offshore companies. Amassi donated over £500,000 to the Tories since 2018, including directly supporting Boris Johnson's leadership bid. The Prime Minister says all donations follow a vetting procedure.
I see that story today, but all I can say on that one is that all these donations are vetted in the normal way, in accordance with rules that were actually set up under the Labour government. So we vet them the whole time.
The leaked documents also show that former Prime Minister Tony Blair saved over £300,000 in stamp duty, buying a £6 million London property in an offshore deal. And in other news, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says the UK will be tough on countries that don't play by the rules. Speaking at the Conservative Party conference on Sunday, she said she's planning new security pacts to strengthen the free world against malign actors. NTD's Jane Worrell has the story.
The new Foreign Secretary pledging to build security pacts with democratic countries to fight malign forces.
The democratic world order faces a stark choice. Either we retreat and retrench in the face of malign actors, or we club together and we advance the cause of freedom.
Speaking at the Conservative Party conference on Sunday, Liz Truss says Britain will challenge authoritarian states through security and trade. Here she directly warns Beijing.
It's important we trade with China, but we must make sure it's reliable trade, that it avoids strategic dependency, and that it doesn't involve the violation of intellectual property rights or forced technology transfer. The world is safer and more prosperous when countries abide by their international obligations.
She specifically spoke about an agreement between Australia, the US and the UK, which aims to counter China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific. Liz Truss was the International Trade Secretary before she was promoted to Foreign Secretary during Boris Johnson's reshuffle in September. Speaking at a fringe event at the Conservative Party conference, she said that the US trade deal isn't the be-all and end-all for the UK, and she highlighted trade deals with the Pacific bloc. She also emphasised working out wider foreign policy with the US and Australia and trading with developing countries so that they won't be drawn into the orbit of authoritarian states. Jane Worrell, NTD News.
Still to come, a Romanian billionaire and his family died when the private plane he piloted crashed into an empty office building in Milan on Sunday. That and more after the break. A small single-engine private plane crashed into a vacant two-story office building in a Milan suburb on Sunday. Authorities say all 8 people aboard died. Italian media reports that Romanian billionaire and real estate mogul Dom Petrescu owned and piloted the plane. His wife and son died as well. The plane crashed shortly after takeoff from Milan's Linate airport, heading to the island of Sardinia. The building burst into flames with a thick column of dark smoke arising from the crash site that was visible for miles. Several parked cars nearby went up in flames. The fire department says no one else but those aboard was hurt. Investigators are probing what caused the crash. In France, rising electricity bills and petrol prices has been fueling discontent among protesters and drivers who complain of increasing pressure on their living costs. NTD's Cost M&S has the story.
France has been experiencing an intense rise in fuel and electricity costs. Last year's cold winter in Europe put pressure on supplies. As a result, stored gas levels are much lower than normal.
Definitely, the price of petrol has increased greatly these past few years. This was just a small fuel tank, but as soon as you have big fuel tanks, it will become a hefty bill.
On Saturday, a group of protesters known as Yellow Vests took to the streets in Paris. They have conducted weekly protests since November 2018 due to a rise in petrol prices. Recent protests have been centered on the COVID health pass, but many also carried banners criticizing the rising energy bills.
Vous avez des mamans avec 2 enfants.
There are mothers of 2 today who have to choose between paying for their energy bill or feeding their children. Therein lies the problem. What's left to live by once we pay the energy bill? It's a big problem.
Ces factures d'énergie, c'est un gros problème.
Drivers see the rise in costs as unsustainable, as petrol prices are nearing £1.70 per litre.
Il faut travailler aussi.
We have to work hard to earn more than €100 a day. For me, I rent this car, which I pay €50 for. And for the remaining €50, I have to eat. I have to fuel up with petrol. So that means I work all day to earn €50.
Although France will move to ease the cost of rising prices for consumers, Prime Minister Jean Castex added that petrol will not be included on that list, saying the situation was different. French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire said earlier this week he expects rising energy prices to last for a few more months. Costa Menes, NTD News.
A Swedish artist who stirred controversy with cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad has been killed in a car crash. Although he lived under police protection, police say there's no indication of outside involvement. Lucy Fielder reports.
Swedish artist Lars Vilks, who stirred worldwide controversy with drawings depicting the Prophet Muhammad with the body of a dog, was killed in a car crash on Sunday, police said. Vilks, who'd been living under police protection since the drawings were published in 2007, was travelling in a police vehicle which collided with a truck near the southern town of Markaryd. 2 officers were also killed. Police called it a tragic accident on Monday and said there was no indication anyone else was involved. Vilks's cartoons came out a year after a Danish newspaper published caricatures of Muhammad that sparked protests around the world. Vilks received death threats and had a bounty put on his head. His house was firebombed. In 2015, 1 person was killed in Copenhagen at a meeting meant to mark the 25th anniversary of an Iranian fatwa against British writer Salman Rushdie, which Vilks attended. Vilks was widely seen as the intended target. The artist said the cartoons weren't meant to provoke Muslims, but to challenge political correctness in the art world. Björn Wiman, arts editor of Swedish daily Dagens Nyheter, said threats against Vilks were an attack on free speech.
I think that instead of understanding that the threats against Lars Vilks were threats against us all and against a free society, many instead reacted by distancing themselves from Lars Vilks and said what he did was unnecessary. Why did he have to make that drawing? Why does he have to do that?
Most Muslims consider any depiction of the founder of Islam offensive.
The NATO-led Kosovo mission on the weekend took over 2 Kosovo Serbia border crossings. This following a deal reached by the 2 countries aimed at de-escalating tensions, triggered by a dispute over vehicle license plates. The EU managed to convince Kosovo and Serbia to let the troops take over the areas for the next 2 weeks. Kosovo Serbs removed trucks that they had used to block the road to the 2 crossings, while Kosovo Special Police Forces left too. Police forces had deployed 2 weeks ago to impose a new rule of removing Serb license plates from cars coming into the country. In response, Serbia deployed troops and military jets flew close to the border with Kosovo. In other news, the highest mountain peak in Western Europe has shrunk. That's according to a team of experts who measured the height of Mont Blanc. Here's NTD's France correspondent David Vivez with more.
Western Europe's highest mountain stands in the middle of the Alps. Nestled in the mountain range that spans across France, Italy and Switzerland, Mont Blanc now rises at a little over 15,773 feet. That's according to the figures from a team of 30 experts who conducted the measurements. The mountain's altitude has varied throughout the years. This is due to how much the eternal snow at its top is curved by weather and wind. Mont Blanc, translated as a white mountain, was the first European mountain to get a name. In the 17th century, it was just called the Cursed Mountain. It was believed to be cursed by local French residents after avalanches destroyed 2 villages in its valley. During the 18th century, priests came to perform exorcisms on the mountain range. Later, the name Mont Blanc was popularized by English aristocrats who led the first expeditions up the mountain. Today, the mountain is popular for hiking, climbing, and winter sports. It takes 2 days of climbing to reach its summit and admire the landscape.
An ancient breed of Irish goats has been deployed to protect the hills around one of Dublin's most affluent suburbs from wildfires. NTD's Joy Duguid brings us this report.
Old Irish goats are a bearded indigenous breed that love to eat the highly flammable vegetation. The local council hopes a herd of 25 will leave the North Dublin suburb of Howth less flammable.
Howth was targeted by a lot of fire, so there's a lot of gorse here and it's very flammable. The goats on the other hand love gorse, so it's a win-win in that sense. I suppose the project also focuses on the Old Irish goat defining their role as a functional biodiversity crew. They're a hard-working crew.
Conservationists also hope the deployment will contribute to the survival of the endangered stocky goats. The Old Irish goat numbered around 250,000 in the early 1900s. Conservationists feared they were extinct until some were found scattered on the western mountains of Mulroney.
They're up for the job, they're keen to do it. It also instills key conservation grazing principles to tackle fire prevention, habitat management, and the control of invasive species. So it's the Old Irish ladies that have a job to do here and are well able to do it.
Padraig Brown runs the Old Irish Goat Society, a 5-acre sanctuary in Mulroney, where the wildfire prevention goats were chosen from. He says the heritage animals need a lot of support for conservation. The grazing project is an ideal solution.
As it's easily seen today, the fires are occurring all over the world, and this is because of, to some extent, the vegetation and maybe climate change and other things. But if you reduce the biomass, reduce the vegetation, the chances of overwhelming fires and all the dangers of that to life and limb and property will be reduced.
The new herd wears GPS tracker boxes around their necks that ping if they stray, and have settled in quickly to their new surroundings. Joy Duguid, NTD News.
Denmark's second largest city has introduced a new type of pedestrian crossing. Aarhus began trialling so-called 3D crossings this week in an attempt to make roads safer. Here's NTD's Joanne Robson with more.
The Danish city of Aarhus has introduced a new kind of pedestrian crossing. Essentially, they are optical illusions painted on the city streets.
It seems like an illusion which lifts above the road's surface. That's the purpose of the 3D crossing.
Authorities began trialling the 3D crossings this week at 3 city centre locations. The pilot project is an attempt to convince motorists and cyclists to slow down.
It is a big problem. Danish traffic law states that you must stop, like it does internationally, but we can see that it is a problem, and it helps with the pedestrian crossing. More people respect it, but not all. Without the pedestrian crossing, no one would stop.
Authorities plan to monitor how traffic and pedestrians respond to the new additions.
Usually there's a lot of bicycles here and cars here and there now, but I think maybe the cyclists have the main priority here. So I hope that this new pavement will maybe block some of the busy cyclists.
The pilot scheme is set to run until May 2024. It's not the first time Aarhus has experimented with its pedestrian crossings. In 2019, authorities installed Viking-themed traffic lights to echo the city's close connection to seafaring. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
The iconic sculptures at Florence's Piazzale Michelangelo are undergoing careful restoration, part of a larger project in the Tuscan city. NTD's Eddie Aiken has this report.
Tourists often make the trek to Piazzale Michelangelo for views of the city and its nearby Arno River. Soon the vantage point might get even more spectacular. Careful restoration is underway on the plaza's monument, dedicated to Italian sculptor Michelangelo. The locale includes a bronze copy of Michelangelo's David.
La storia della copia del David.
The history of the copy of the David dates back to around 1840, when, with Leopold II, Grand Duke of Tuscany, it was decided to make a copy of the marble David that was in the Piazza della Signoria, a very famous masterpiece by Michelangelo that had preservation problems and had to be put indoors, but the project took a very long time.
Restoration work began earlier this year in April and is being led by architect Tommaso Moccini.
First of all, we start with a pre-wash for the bronzes in order to remove the more superficial patina chemical coating. Also because we need it in order to understand the state of deterioration of the metal. Regarding the marbles, the superficial sediments that are easier to detach are removed, and after that we start to assess the crack patterns, if there are any.
While the bronze David remains at Piazzale Michelangelo, the 4 other statues have been transported to a Florence workshop. Restorer Nicola Salviole says they are now carefully removing sedimentary materials.
Afterwards, we carry out mostly mechanical cleaning with micro brushes and other manual brushes in order to remove these corrosion products that are less cohesive, and then to perform other more delicate procedures with a sort of vegetable microblasting and other washes to remove the last residues of corrosion.
The restoration work is expected to be finished by the end of this year. It is the first step of a larger restoration project in the Tuscan city, but will also include sculptures at Piazza della Signora. Work there will begin next year. Earlier this year, Piazzale Michelangelo was granted UNESCO World Heritage status. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
That's the news for today, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Stuart Leith. Thank you for watching our daily news show on YouTube. You can also watch our other programming on channel 190 on Sky TV or on Freeview via channel box on channel 271. In the meantime though, please give this video a like and hit subscribe to our channel. Have a good day.